for me, that was sort of one of the best parts of the book, and sort of how it orchestrated sort of the relationships and how they interacted. A particular part of the book that I enjoyed was when actually Dag, who was at that point, he was in Toronto and he was in advertising. He had reported his company because of he thought that the building was making him sick, and he had a run-in with his boss, Martin. And I thought it was interesting because the two of them couldn't understand each other. You know,
Martin's in his 40s, right?
Martin's in his 40s.
He's our age now.
He's our age now, that's right. And I think he called him a bleeding ponytail. I think was the term that he had used.
He's supposed to be a boom. He stands for the boomer ethos, I guess.
That's right. And it was interesting because, you know, Dag was basically saying that he was only there because of when he was born, he had won the genetic lottery, I think is what they had said. So he didn't really respect them, and you know, all of the things that Martin was going on about, you know, how rich he was and all of the, you know, material possessions that you know, Dag just didn't care about. And on the other hand, Martin couldn't understand the younger generation because it didn't matter, it seemed, what they did. The workplace wasn't good enough. They were always complaining. There was always moping around. And when they did get a promotion or they did something well, they would leave, and I think they said, you know, go pick grapes somewhere.
Does that sound a little to you like a 40-something Xer now complaining about a millennial?
I think what we see is, you know, things just shift and the patterns repeat.
Hannah, what do you think?
I found the interaction that Andy has with his parents when he goes home for Christmas quite telling. This sort of sense that he has that every child always thinks that they're so much more progressive than their parents in all these kinds of ways. And he's making reference to his mom's recycling, or I guess lack thereof, tendencies, and how, you know, how does she not know this? This is so fundamental. You do not put this certain wrapper in this garbage bag. And I think a lot of, certainly my friends at university, you know, love to talk about all these things that they're learning about that their parents surely have never thought of. And if only, you know, our parents knew this, then perhaps our lives would have been so much better. So I think that that's an interesting connection that he makes with his parents. And, you know, the holidays is always they're always a good time to bring out some of these tensions. Mm-hmm. And certainly with the younger brother as well, that you have this tendency to think that your generation or what you're going through is perhaps the most poignant, the most formative, and whatever anybody else is experiencing is some pale shadow of what you're learning about. And I feel that that was sort of the relationship that Andy had with his younger brother Tyler. And I can think of friends of mine who sort of compare what they're going through with what their siblings may be experiencing, and there's a tendency to overvalue maybe your own experiences at the expense of others.
You mentioned the Andy going home for Christmas, because I like that part of the book as well, because he sort of referred to his parents as putting a lot of energy into not changing their home that had been exactly the same for 15 years. And, you know, just some of the sort of stilted conversations and uncomfortable sort of relations that he had. And I think at one point his mom said something, you know, like, so is that the way you're cutting your hair now, dear? So it's just, you know, just one of those things that you can just, you know, substitute, you know, any type of thing in
Absolutely.
there. It really sort of struck a chord.
Bob, you've spanned a few of the generations that are represented in this book, and how fair do you think it was at characterizing the relationships between the different generations?
No, I had a good laugh at the trip home and so forth, because he brings up stuff that I think every kid has had, all these interactions with their parents and so forth. And again, I think he makes it quite clear by the end, though, that every single generation, if you want to call them that, feels that they are going through the most important changes in the world, and that nobody else understands, either younger or older. And in the end, and he makes it clear that whether it's Tyler, the young kid who, you know, looks like he's enjoying life to the fullest and doesn't really care about the future and is, you know, is confident about the future and so forth, that there are these deep-seated fears in even Tyler. Mm-hmm. And the older generation who, one of the things I loved was he brings up a couple times of these old boomers who basically keep matchboxes in their brandy snifters. And I know people who have kept matchboxes in their brandy snifters, and it's this idea that you can sort of capture the great moments of your life in these little sort of...
the lounges you visited.
Yeah, sort of symbols, if you were, little symbols of your travels and your excitement. But anyway, the feeling that that you don't, your parents aren't changing and so forth, and yet in a sense he's not really changing much either, and that we all get stuck in basically our ruts. It's very difficult to sort of extricate ourselves from what we are initially, our childhood brings into our lives.
Stephen, something that Bob alluded to I thought was kind of interesting was this sort of instinct to sneer at the generation just before yours. And it's something that the boomers engaged in definitely. They were sort of the authors of the don't trust anyone over 30 and that sort of thing. But is that almost just something that is an inheritance, a cultural inheritance, that we're bound to look at the people who came just before us and blame them for our ills?
It sort of becomes an easy target, and whether it's justified or not, I guess that's for discussion. But I think as you get older and you have more sort of shared life with older people, you sort of better appreciate sort of what they're going through as you move up than the people below you. I guess as the younger generations would sort of maybe see you in the same way.
Hannah, do you and your friends talk about this? Do you resent the Xers, for example?
I think in the sense that we are sort of becoming adults and we think very much of what our parents may have felt like or what their economic situations would have been like. And you can't help but know what people's minimum wages were at that time and how much they were paying for university, as an example, and how much we pay now. And you do sort of think that maybe things were so much simpler just one generation ago when our parents were graduating from university. On the flip side, I feel that there's also a bit of a sneering maybe towards the generation that's coming directly after you. I know that, everyone likes to think about the whole kids today. They don't know anything, but I think it works on the flip side as well, that you maybe resent the generation that's coming up, that they could not have possibly and will not ever have experienced and known as much as you already have in your... It's
an extension of I walked 16 miles through the snow to get to school.
Absolutely.
When I was your age.
Yeah. I remember when I only had, 8 channels on TV, right? It's all relative, right?
I still have only 2.